Hi, my name is Joe Cambria. I was born August 28, 1958 in Montreal.
Joe, tell us about your lacrosse career.
Well, I started, my first contact with lacrosse came watching TV, actually, watching Saturday Zeros back in 1970, I'm going to say. And coincidence had it that the year after in Anjou, where we lived, they actually started lacrosse as a recreational in the parks. And I got in contact with lacrosse there. And I played for the city. Well, the city, there was only one team, and it was us, a group of 11-year-olds. And from there, I played different little tournaments. Funny because, I look back and I remember playing a tournament in Saint Michel. And for me, that was the other end of the world. I had never been outside of my municipality. After that, in '74, through a great coincidence, I played for a coach named Jacques Lebel, who was also a teacher at Brebeuf College, who has a great reputation for lacrosse, which I didn't even know about. And after my bantam year, my first bantam year, the second year he organized a game where we played against his students. And there, they recruited me, and they said, you got to come and play for our junior team in Montreal and Saint-Michel-Castor. And so that's when I started my junior career. I turned 15. I played for Pierre Filion and Robert Matt. Those were my two first coaches. And I went on, I played 6 years junior and finished off my senior with the Montreal International Club in 1980 and 81 in the Can-Am League. And we played in junior. I need to mention we played in the Inter-Provincial League. And then the Quebec Lacrosse Federation, we revamped or restarted the Quebec Junior Conference. And yeah, that's it. That's pretty much my career.
You're quite humble because you said you played.
Yeah.
I think, did you not dominate junior and senior lacrosse?
Well, it's I probably had during those years, I think my first year in junior, even though my coach didn't play me at the first 3 games, I still finished second scorer on the team. I did pretty good, and the second year I finished second in the league, and after that I think every year after I finished first, except for 1 year, which was won by Denis Lavoie, which was also a great lacrosse player. In the Can-Am League, I think those were probably my 2 best years as a player. If I could go back, my first year in the Can-Am League, I was fortunate enough. I did finish first scorer as a rookie in the Can-Am League, which had a lot of great players. So yeah, I can say that's certainly something that I remember.
Mm-hmm. When you look at your career, who are the best players that you played against?
A lot of these names people probably won't know outside of Quebec, but there were a lot of good players in Quebec. I think in the 70s, 80s, lacrosse was very healthy in Quebec, and the caliber of play was quite high. So I had the fortunate to play against players like I talked about Denis Lavoie, André Pronovo, Michel Labossière was a goaltender, a great goaltender, Daniel Hébert, Guy Vallée. Like these are names of just some of the players that I had the opportunity to play against. And obviously when you're playing against players, the higher the caliber, well, the higher you can measure yourself and the more you work to be able to stay at that caliber or try to exceed that caliber.
Et quand tu regardes ta carrière, qui sont les bons joueurs de crosse avec lesquels tu as joué, les gens qui étaient dans ton équipe?
Ouais, j'ai eu quand même, j'ai joué avec des bons joueurs. Del McKenzie, qui est un ancien des Québécois, a joué dans mon équipe. J'ai joué avec des joueurs comme Marc Poirier, très bon joueur de crosse. J'ai mentionné Michel Labossière, peut-être le meilleur gardien de but junior dans le moment. Il y en a d'autres, il y en a tellement, puis j'ai cette sensation-là que lorsque je jouais dans une équipe, tous les joueurs étaient bons pour moi. Hein.
Est-ce que c'est toi qui rendais les joueurs meilleurs ou c'était les joueurs qui te rendaient meilleur?
Je vais mentionner, parce que je vais revenir sur la question d'avant, puis je vais répondre à la tienne. Il y a 2 joueurs dans ma carrière qui m'ont marqué. Il y a eu un excellent joueur, peut-être les 2 meilleurs. Le premier, Robert Matt, qui était le gardien de but. J'ai joué avec Robert dans les années seniors, donc en 80-81 pour le Montréal International. Robert était possiblement le meilleur gardien de but au Québec de tous les temps. Et dans la Ligue Can-Am, Robert dominait cette ligue-là comme gardien de but. Puis, je ne peux pas m'arrêter de penser que peut-être que mes statistiques offensives auraient été différentes si j'avais joué contre Robert Marc. Mais moi, j'étais chanceux, je jouais avec lui. Et le deuxième, c'est Danny Lowe. Danny Lowe est un joueur, un droitier, Danny avait, lui, une capacité. Pour moi, c'était le joueur de crosse parfait. Bon offensivement, bon défensivement, un lancer au-dessus de l'épaule qui était extraordinaire, un laser. Et Danny, c'était peut-être le meilleur coéquipier que j'ai eu dans ma vie, dans tous les sports confondus. Et aussi, Danny était aimé de tout le monde, même les opposants l'aimaient. Ouais. Mm-hmm. Et est-ce que ces joueurs-là m'ont rendu meilleur? Je pense que c'était ta deuxième question. Ouais. Et certainement, ces joueurs-là m'ont rendu meilleur parce que les joueurs contre qui j'ai joué, les joueurs avec qui j'ai joué, j'avais une responsabilité envers eux. Je prenais mon rôle au sérieux en tant que joueur et coéquipier. Donc, ils me forçaient à toujours me dépasser. Et moi, j'essayais toujours de les rendre meilleurs, de les mettre dans les meilleures positions possibles pour qu'ils puissent s'épanouir.
Joe, you've been captain of every team that you played on since you were Bantam.
Almost, yeah.
What were the components of your leadership that the people who selected you as team captain, what did they see?
Well, that's a tough question. I think you would have had to ask them. But, if I think about this, and I remember the answer might not be sexy. I think it comes from my upbringing and how I was brought up. Certain values that I truly believed in and I tried to live by. And I think the first one was respect. That was very important in my family, respecting others, respecting your elders, respecting, authority, right, the teachers. So that, I think, was one thing that I lived by, and that helped. The second one, empathy. We were always brought up to care for others and have empathy for people, to be helpful, right, to understand. And also, my mother made it a very big point, always keep us grounded, to stay humble in your success, and don't brag, just be humble. And I think maybe by living that without knowing, it allowed my coaches maybe to put me in a position where they knew that I would respect what they wanted or the culture. My empathy with other players, they were my teammates, and I connected well with them. And regardless of maybe my status in regards to, whether I was a top scorer or the best player or whatever awards I would win, I always stayed very humble, and I always never took things for granted on any team that I played. And I think that maybe that was some of the, attributes that helped my captaincy.
Tu as toujours été le capitaine de presque toutes les équipes pour lesquelles tu as joué. Qu'est-ce que les gens trouvaient chez toi qui les faisait choisir Joe Cambria pour être capitaine Joe?
OK. Mais comme je disais, je pense que j'ai été élevé d'une certaine façon qui a peut-être aidé, qui a facilité ce choix-là. On a été élevé chez nous, puis moi, j'ai essayé de vivre par cette valeur-là, le respect des autres, le respect de l'autorité, le respect des aînés. C'est des choses qui sont très importantes. De l'empathie. On a aussi été élevé avec essayer de comprendre les autres, avoir de l'empathie envers les gens. Et ma mère a toujours pas mis beaucoup d'efforts sur nous faire comprendre qu'il faut rester humble. L'humilité, tout est éphémère, de rester humble. Puis je pense que ces trois valeurs-là, j'ai véhiculé, malgré moi, là, c'était juste la façon que j'étais. Puis c'était peut-être plus facile pour un coach de dire Joe va être le capitaine parce que je pouvais à ce moment-là rassembler, j'étais proche de tous les joueurs. C'est sûr que je respectais l'autorité, le coach, c'est sûr que je respectais ce que je devais faire sur le terrain. Et malgré les succès ou malgré tout, je n'ai jamais pris pour acquis, donc j'ai tout le temps travaillé très fort. Je ne me suis jamais pris pour un autre avec mon équipe ou avec les autres. Puis je pense que ça a certainement aidé. Il y a un instructeur, un coach, Bernard Beaubien, qui lui m'a dit carrément qu'une des raisons pour lesquelles il m'avait choisi, c'est parce que je parlais anglais, puis ça peut servir lorsqu'on jouait contre des équipes anglophones.
As a team captain, you had to deal with officials
Yeah.
for years and years and years. How did you relate with officials?
Well, first off, I could talk the question of respect, and I understood that they were the authority. They were there to make sure that the rules were abided by. So I never had a bad relation. On the contrary, I think I had pretty good relationship with the referees because I treated them with respect and I followed their instructions, right? Or in regards to because of that, it enabled me to get very good explanations sometimes, and I think it also helped in maybe protecting me a little bit more on the field when I played. I think that I had very little bad experiences with referees, but even in those bad experiences, I always respected the fact that they were the authority on the court.
Joe, you're regarded by just about everybody as the best player to have graced the game in Quebec. What were your greatest strengths and, if any, the weaknesses that you had as a player?
Okay, well, that the fact that a lot of people considered me the best player at that time came with the responsibility. So I think it made me work harder. I always believed that other players probably had better sticks than I did. But I worked hard. I think my strongest attributes as a player, first off, I would say the mental aspect of it. I did take a lot of time when I was on the bench looking at how the game was going, how players were playing. I always prided myself in being a two-way player. So to me, the offensive stats or the offensive skills needed to be matched defensively. That was very important to me. And it helped me a great deal having that skill defensively. It helped me offensively. And from a loose ball perspective, I prided myself a great deal in grabbing the loose balls and getting the loose balls. That to me was a very, I was very proud of that, right? Regardless, of my size or to come out and have that ball. And I think that, from a skills perspective, that was it. Maybe people, my speed and my endurance obviously helped, right? Yeah. My weaknesses?
Yeah, you're presented to everyone as the total package.
Yeah. Well,
what's the weaknesses?
I'm gonna try to stay away from that one, but I'd have to go back and think of my coaches and some of the things that they would tell me. And the one thing that comes back a lot were from two of my coaches in my last junior year and my senior years. And it was Serge Paquette and Henri Fournier were my coaches, teammates and coaches. And I always played the game by the book. So that means that if I came on a 2-on-1 and I had the ball, my role was to attract that defensive player towards me so I could pass the ball to my teammate. Regardless of who that teammate was, I would do that because that's how you should play a 2-on-1. And I can, same thing if we're a two-man power play, if one of my teammates was ahead of me, well, I would pass the ball to that teammate. And I remember coming back to the benches lots of time, and Serge and Artie would say, shoot, don't, why did you pass the ball? Next time, keep the ball. So I don't know if that's a weakness, but I think they thought it was, and I'm sure that I must have cost them some points in some games by doing that, maybe. But yeah, that's, yeah.
You gave many, many lectures after your playing career and also while you were playing, and you often stressed the fact that even though you won so many games, that it's when you lose that you can progress and develop. What was the message?
Well, I think that, I didn't invent anything. I think you hear a lot of people that will tell you that to succeed, you need to fail. And it's what you do with those failures that matters. I strongly believe that, you hear it sometimes, adversity builds character. I think that adversity, you can develop character. So what I mean is that when you take the time to understand what happened or analyze it, and if you're honest with yourself, and you need to be, what role did I play in that defeat or that loss? I think it helps you prepare for the next one, and it just makes you a more complete and better if you don't repeat them and if you understand what happened. And it's not always only on yourself, right? It's also in regards to when you look at the whole team, the whole concept. And even today in my job, when we always debrief on whether we win a contract or lose a contract or a situation, we do a debrief or we talk about it. I don't officially call it a debrief, but I'll do that with my salespeople or my engineers. And I always say, I don't say, what did you learn from that experience? I always ask, what would you do differently? Because it's different. What would you differently means it only encompasses you. It encompasses your strategy. It encompasses the people you worked with, the people you dealt with. So I think that there's always something positive that comes out of a defeat or a loss of contract. It doesn't matter. You can build on that. And that can make you successful next time.
Joe, une des grandes défaites de ta carrière, c'était aux Jeux du Canada de 1977, où est-ce que le Québec a terminé deuxième.
Ouais.
Tu as souvent dit que c'est quand on perd qu'on peut devenir meilleur.
Ouais.
Qu'est-ce que tu fais comme évaluation de cette défaite-là et comment est-ce que tu réfléchis sur une défaite pour devenir meilleur?
Oui. Ça s'est passé en 1977 aux Jeux du Canada à Terre-Neuve. Et la mémoire que j'en ai, pour moi, ça a été, j'ai pas gagné, j'ai perdu l'or, j'ai pas gagné l'argent à cette compétition-là. Au point de vue de l'équipe, je pense que par contre, ça a été une bonne victoire pour le Québec, pour la Lacrosse, puis je peux en parler. Mais ce que j'ai appris de cette défaite-là, plus tard, quand j'ai analysé ça, parce que moi, ça a vraiment été une grosse défaite pour moi. J'ai compris, et ça m'a servi dans ma vie professionnelle, j'ai compris que dans une équipe, c'est important que l'ensemble de l'équipe ait le même objectif. Et je ne dis pas que les joueurs qui étaient sur mon équipe, je pense que tout le monde voulait gagner la médaille d'or. Par contre, peut-être, puis ça c'est juste une analyse que j'en fais, peut-être que certains joueurs, juste d'être rendu à la finale, c'était une victoire. Peut-être de juste avoir terminé parmi les meilleurs compteurs du tournoi, c'était une victoire. Tu comprends? Donc, ces objectifs-là sont importants, mais ce qui est plus important, c'est d'avoir l'objectif ultime et il faut être sûr que tout le monde embarque vers cet objectif-là. Donc, ce que j'ai appris, et peut-être que ce n'était pas le cas, mais par la suite, je me suis toujours assuré que, même au point de vue professionnel, que je peux comprendre que chacun peut avoir des objectifs personnels, mais il faut trouver la façon de les embarquer collectivement dans l'objectif principal.
You're one of the passionate people about the game. You talk about it with great respect and passion. What is it with lacrosse that brings out such a passion in you?
Well, first off, I think the history of the game itself. I was very impressed by, how the natives and what it meant for them and where it came from. And Quebec has a very rich history of lacrosse. Montreal and Quebec are probably where modern lacrosse was born, right? And a lot of great players that evolved back in those days. And I think that aspect really interested me, and I wanted somehow to be a little part of that, right, of that heritage. The second thing is that as an athlete, as a kid, I played basketball, football, field hockey, handball, just soccer. And lacrosse, to me, was the ultimate game for any athlete. It was the fastest game on 2 feet. That's the way we used to talk about lacrosse. So, fastest game on 2 feet. You had an asset. You had that stick. And that stick was an offensive asset. If you were good with it, you could be dangerous with it and score. On defense, it was an asset. Defensively, you could take the ball away. You could stop a player. So combining the speed, offense and defense, the tactical and strategic aspect of the game, for an athlete, I think, I did track and I think I could combine all of those different sports in one, which I thought was the most complete and most beautiful game you could play.
Tu as toujours parlé de la crosse avec infiniment de passion et aussi de respect. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a dans la crosse qui fait qu'un athlète comme toi en parle avec tant de passion?
En premier lieu, c'est l'histoire de la crosse, ce que la crosse représente au Canada, à travers le monde, mais toute l'histoire derrière les peuples autochtones, l'héritage qu'ils ont transporté et ce que c'était. Le Québec a une très grande histoire avec la crosse. C'est ici que la crosse, au Québec, que la crosse moderne est née. Il y a eu des grands joueurs, il y a eu des grandes ligues au Québec et je voulais faire partie un peu de cette histoire-là, au moins de pouvoir la partager. Au point de vue athlétique, ou au point de vue sport comme athlète, dans ma carrière, comme jeune joueur, comme jeune homme, j'ai joué au football, au basketball, au handball, au soccer. J'ai fait de la course. Et pour moi, la crosse, ça combinait tous ces sports-là en un. Défensivement, offensivement, être bon dans les deux sens de passion. C'était le sport le plus rapide sur deux pieds. La tactique, les tactiques utilisées, la stratégie. Pour moi, la crosse, c'était le sport ultime. Tout athlète devrait jouer à la crosse parce que c'est le sport qui combine l'ensemble de tout ce que le sport peut apporter à un athlète.
I've always heard you, or often heard you say about people who talk about the game that they do it for the love of the game.
Yeah.
And you've always had reservations when you heard people say that. What were those reservations?
First of all, I want to say that I never doubted that they loved the game and that they really felt that way. But I make a very big distinction between love and respect. And I think that lacrosse, we should respect lacrosse more than we love it. And the reason I say that is that I think that, a lot of foolish things in the world are done or were done under the name of love, for love. And I think everybody can relate to it. Different, sometimes, best example I can give you is that you can love nature, but if you don't respect it, you can hurt it, right? You might not like the rules, but if you don't respect them, you're going to hurt the game. So I think that I always felt that, not everybody, they use that as a justification for having done something against either the governance of the game that could have really hurt the game. They really did it because they loved it. For example, if I go back to when I was president of the Lacrosse Federation, there's a lot of issues back then on insurance and insuring players, and the Federation had a responsibility of making sure that the game was sanctioned, that the referees were sanctioned by the Federation. But we did have some associations that would organize games against teams from Ontario and would use their own referees. And they did it for the love of the game. They did it because they wanted the game to grow. I mean, that's the reasons they were giving us, but they really could have hurt the game. Something would have happened to one of those kids. They would have been a great responsibility, and it would have been terrible for the game of lacrosse. So yeah, that's and I don't judge people that say that. I think a lot of people, when they say that, they truly mean it. I would rather people say that I do it or I did it for the respect of the game.
Tu as dit souvent que tu avais des réserves mentales quand tu entendais les gens dire « j'ai fait ça parce que j'aime la crosse ». Qu'est-ce que c'était ces réserves-là que tu avais?
OK. J'ai jamais douté que les gens aimaient le sport. Quand ils disaient ça, je n'en doute pas. Mais pour moi, il y a une grosse différence entre aimer et respecter. Et cette ligne-là, par exemple, tu peux aimer la nature, mais si tu ne respectes pas la nature, tu peux y faire beaucoup de tort. Tu peux pas aimer les règlements, mais si tu ne les respectes pas, tu peux causer beaucoup de tort. Et souvent, les gens utilisent ça pour justifier une action qui a été posée qui aurait pu causer du mal à la crosse. Par exemple, lorsque j'étais président de la fédération, il y avait eu des incidents avec des assurances et la fédération avait une responsabilité au point de vue d'assurer les joueurs et d'assurer les parties. Donc, on sanctionnait les arbitres, les parties, et même les parties hors concours, ça devait être quand même gouverné de cette façon-là. Mais il y en a des associations qui organisaient des parties avec d'autres clubs de l'Ontario, par exemple. Et on n'était pas au courant, puis là, ils mettaient leurs arbitres, puis ils faisaient le match. Et quand on les confrontait, ils nous disaient qu'ils avaient fait ça pour le bien de la crosse, parce qu'ils aimaient la crosse, puis c'était la façon de générer de l'intérêt. Ils auraient pu causer beaucoup de tort, non seulement à la crosse en général, mais même à leur propre association. Donc, c'est important de respecter le sport. J'aimerais mieux que les gens disent je l'ai fait pour respect au sport.
Joe, you've played lacrosse, and now in the corporate world, you're vice president of a large international corporation. You're very successful in the business world. What has lacrosse given you that has allowed you to climb all the way to where you are today as vice president?
Well, that's a good question. I think as a kid, lacrosse kind of brought me up. I was, in a certain way, it played a great deal in my character. So it allowed me to interact, and it allowed me to see that if you worked very hard at something, you could be good at it. And I think I carried that throughout my life. It gave me that confidence to say that, you know what, if you really put your mind to this, Joe, you might not be the best at whatever you take, but you'll be pretty good at it, right? And you'll work at it. So that, to me, is something that I carry through. I also, through lacrosse, I realized that I could make a difference in people's lives, personally, right? So that, I think, really helped me. That understanding, that capability of looking at analyzing what happened and being able to carry that through, that I still do today. Look, like I talked before about, what have you learned? How can you do things differently? Analyzing the situation. All of that came from lacrosse, right? All of that level of confidence and the level to really believe that, if you really pay attention to it, if you respect it, and if you work at it, you could do a pretty good job.
Joe, tu as été un joueur de crosse avec une extraordinaire carrière. Maintenant, dans le monde corporatif, tu es le vice-président d'une grande fédération, d'une grande corporation internationale. Qu'est-ce que le sport de la crosse t'a apporté qui t'a permis de gravir tous ces échelons-là pour être aujourd'hui l'homme d'affaires que tu es?
Ben, ça m'a apporté, la crosse a joué un très grand rôle dans ma croissance personnelle. Parce qu'avec la crosse, j'ai appris à interagir avec les gens, j'ai appris à respecter les règlements, j'ai appris à travailler ensemble. Ça, c'est des choses que ça m'a apporté, mais la plus grande chose que ça m'a apporté, c'est la confiance. De savoir que si vraiment je travaillais, je m'y mettais, je pratiquais, par exemple, je pourrais être assez bon. Et ça, je l'ai transporté à travers toute ma vie. Je pense que le travail, la capacité de vraiment vouloir, cette confiance-là que j'ai acquis de la crosse, naturellement, m'a aidé dans ma vie professionnelle aussi. Oui.
If there's one thing that you would have done differently in your playing career, what would it have been?
That's a hard question to answer because, first off, I think I'm of the type that I don't look back on the decisions or the choices that I made. I try to make them, whatever choice I make, I try to make it work. I don't try to look back and say I should have or I could have. So that enables me to always do the best in what I'm doing. I always had a good sense of loyalty towards the Quebec Lacrosse because Quebec Lacrosse made me. So I had a sense of responsibility that I had to get back to my province, to the federation, and to lacrosse. So a lot of people, I remember John Davis and even Sandy Lynch when I played for them. Even Jen Bishop once told me that I could play, I should go play in Oshawa or Peterborough, go play junior there, right? And that could have opened up different doors for me. But the choice to me was, I couldn't make that choice. It was, I had to give back to the people that believed in me and gave me that opportunity to grow. So I don't know if I would have done anything different as a player. I might have done things differently as the federation president. That I might have done things differently.
How would you like the game to remember you?
You know, that's a question that I often ask when I do interviews, when I try to hire people. I always ask them the question, what would be on your grave, or how would you like people to remember you? And the reason I ask that is because whatever you say is how you live, how you should be living your life, right? If you want people to remember you as being good, well, you need to be good, right? To be a good person, you need to be a good person. So I think I want people to remember me as, being a humble person, a good teammate, and a fair person. That to me would be what I want them to remember me as. Yeah.
Quand tu regardes l'évolution de ta vie
Oui.
et surtout de ta carrière à la crosse et maintenant dans le monde des affaires, comment est-ce que tu aimerais que les gens se souviennent de Joe Cambria?
C'est drôle que tu me poses cette question-là parce que c'est souvent une question que je pose lors des entrevues quand j'engage les gens. Je leur demande toujours si tu meurs et les gens vont venir parler à ton funérail, qu'est-ce que tu veux qu'ils disent de toi? Et souvent, si les gens me disent, je veux qu'on se souvienne de moi comme étant une personne honnête, mais ça veut dire que tu vis ta vie avec honnêteté, ou tu vas toujours essayer de vivre ta vie avec honnêteté. Donc, moi, je voudrais que les gens se souviennent de moi comme étant une personne qui était juste, humble et un bon coéquipier. C'est tout.
Même si tu étais le meilleur joueur, tu veux qu'on se rappelle de toi comme un coéquipier.
Oui, oui.
Joe, tu as mentionné que tu avais des anges qui ont guidé ton trajet dans la vie.
Ouais.
Qu'est-ce que c'est ça?
OK. Je pense que le premier ministre Legault a volé cette expression-là de moi pendant la pandémie, parce que toute ma vie, j'ai dit que moi, j'ai eu des anges gardiens dans ma vie. Et de tout jeune, là, des adultes qui m'ont un peu protégé dans mon trajet. Il faut dire que moi, je viens d'une famille très modeste, une famille, mon père a immigré ici au début des années 1900, mais le sport chez nous, ça n'existait pas, à part le soccer en Italie, et le hockey, le baseball, la TV, il n'y avait pas grand-chose. Je suis le seul athlète, puis j'ai eu la chance que des gens dans ce milieu-là qui m'ont pris puis qui m'ont protégé. Et je les appelle mes anges gardiens qui m'ont guidé. J'ai mentionné, par exemple, Jacques Lebel a été pour moi quelqu'un qui a pris soin de moi. Je ne le savais pas, mais il a pris soin de moi. Pierre Filion, c'est un gars qui m'a toujours aidé, il m'a protégé. Et j'en suis très reconnaissant. Robert Matt, une autre personne qui a été pour moi un mentor. Encore aujourd'hui, c'est un ami. Je suis privilégié de l'avoir comme ami. Fait que j'ai eu des gens comme ça dans ma vie qui m'ont aidé gratuitement, ils l'ont fait pour moi. Et je leur en ai très reconnaissant. Et d'ailleurs, quand j'ai l'occasion, je leur dis.
Joe, you mentioned that you were blessed with having guardian angels in your life. What's that?
Yeah, I called them guardian angels because I didn't know what they were, what they did for me back when I was a kid. I came from a modest family, and we weren't, sports was not part of our, of our DNA. We just did not have that in the family, and I had a lot of adults that took care of me, protected me, as from a 10 or 11-year-old all the way through my career. And they did it, it was free. It was for no reason. They had nothing to gain from it, but yet they protected me. And, they helped form me, and they helped me make decisions in my life. And, I think that even today, I mentioned Jacques Lebel, Juan, Pierre Fillon, Robert Matt. I'll mention, Sandy Lynch and John Davis when I played for them in Lachine, in Montreal. For that 1 year, some of the things, that Sandy Lynch said to me still stick to me today. Some of the things that John Davis told me, right, helped me be a better player, and they protected me. They took care of me. Yeah. So what I mean by that, if I have the opportunity, and it's still today when I do see them, if I have a chance, I thank them for what they did for me.
What do you see as the future of the game of lacrosse?
Yeah, I don't want to be pessimistic about it, because I think that lacrosse will always live. It will always be a great sport, and it is a great sport. I think that if we don't start looking at things differently, it'll always be, unfortunately, a little bit of a marginal sport. I think we need to be more open to inclusive in regards to the game and the people. I think that the stronger provinces or the stronger associations have a responsibility to help build the grassroots outside of their communities. I think that there's a lot of things that we can learn from the heritage and from the history of the game that we, unfortunately forgot, or we didn't cultivate it enough. So for me, the future, if you would ask me what I would do, I think that the future of the game is more on the field, on the field level, field lacrosse. And I say that because it is a very, I think, very disciplined sport. And it's, if you look at the U.S., it's like, it's a prep school sport. I think that is where we need to maybe invest a little bit more. And I think from there, we can grow the rest of the box. I'm a box player, and I always will be, and I think it's the most beautiful game in the world. But we need to make it a beautiful game, an inclusive game. I always say that I told you I didn't come from a sports family. If my parents would have seen a professional lacrosse game in 1974, they never would have allowed me to play lacrosse because of the image that it gave. So I think that there's work to be done from that level to make it, and I think we need to respect what that game is, the integrity of it, and we have to stop changing it to try to please, right? We have to change it from the inside and not for the outside.
Quand tu regardes ta carrière et que tu regardes vers l'avenir, qu'est-ce que tu vois comme l'avenir du sport de la crosse?
Je veux quand même être optimiste avec... j'ai l'impression que la crosse doit commencer à faire les choses différemment. Sinon, la crosse va toujours rester un sport marginal. On doit être plus inclusif, on doit être plus ouvert. Les associations ou les provinces les plus fortes ont une responsabilité d'investir dans les bases à l'extérieur de leur province ou à l'extérieur de leur région. Si on veut que le sport grandisse, il faut arrêter de le changer pour plaire. Il faut peut-être respecter l'intégrité du sport et l'ouvrir d'une façon plus générale, envers toutes les communautés. Je pense qu'on doit investir, moi comme président dans le temps, j'aurais passé plus de temps à investir du côté de field, de la crosse au champ, parce que les débouchés, parce que le sport est mieux, personnellement, je crois qu'il était mieux encadré, était un sport qui était plus discipliné et était un sport qui pouvait plaire à l'ensemble et aussi le potentiel d'ouverture que ça peut donner à nos athlètes au point de vue de continuer les études, d'aller étudier aux États-Unis, par exemple. Je pense que c'est des choses qu'on doit faire. Moi, je suis un joueur de crosse en enclos, de boxe lacrosse. Je vais toujours l'être. Je suis fier de ce sport-là, j'aime ce sport-là, mais j'ai vraiment peur que si on continue à faire des choses comme on le fait, on va demeurer ce qu'on est aujourd'hui.
Specifically, how would you see the future of the game in Quebec?
I thought about that in regards to when I left the Federation completely, when I walked away from it. What I realized is that the things that I would do differently, and I think the things that need to be done today in order to grow the game, because there's still a lot of players, well, a lot, there's not as much as before, and it's not as well publicized as it was. But I would definitely, probably number one, I would build on our heritage and on our history. I think that the lack of understanding of the culture of the game in Quebec, I mentioned before, the birth of lacrosse happened here, of modern lacrosse. It happened in Montreal, it happened in Quebec, right? The openness, right? We have the natives, that we're privileged to be right next to, Kanawagi and Akwesasne, and these are great lacrosse heritage, right there. And I think I would have built on that more, to have people made aware of that strength that we had and that heritage that we had, right? A little bit when I said that I wanted to be a little bit part of it, I think we could have used that to have a lot of other players want to be a little bit part of it. I think I would have spent, I would have put a track, or I would have spent time on building the field game more back in 2000, making sure that outside of just governance of the game itself and the day-to-day operation, we should have looked at developing that. I would have looked at developing that more and making sure that that had more visibility. That I think would have helped. And I think that I should have said, let's look at the threats that are ahead of us if we don't do things differently. What are the threats that are stopping us from progressing? And we would have been able to put up a plan, maybe a longer term plan, a 5-year plan, to change that. So I think that, hopefully that maybe people will listen to this and think about, doing that. In business, we do things called SWOT analysis. S for your strengths, right? W for your weaknesses, O for your opportunities, and T for your threats. And in order to have a healthy business, a healthy growth, you have to look at those 4 aspects and build your plan based on that. And if the people would have, if we would have taken, and people take the time to understand what the threats are, as well as the opportunities, and understand your weaknesses and your strengths, and build on them, I think the game might have been in a better situation today. I'm also going to say, the reason I think historically we need to do more, I lived it in Quebec. When I got conscious of it, and you think about it, there were people before me, right, that did great things for the game. But the minute that they left the game, they left. And we never talked about them anymore, right? I can think of the Blanchard brothers, right, for example. And then, I lived it myself, right? Then we have somebody else. And when Pierre Fillon leaves, well, now it's finished, it's done. Pierre Fillon, we don't talk about what was done. We don't talk about the heritage that is left. And unfortunately, it's that kind of a game. It's like that doesn't exist anymore. We're starting from scratch. And I think we need to change that. I think we need to change that.
What have you brought us today, Joe, as part of your souvenirs and your history?
Okay, well, I got a couple of things. I brought this. This is my first ever lacrosse stick. And the story behind it is that when I played my first couple of years, the city I played for, Anjou, they actually bought the stick for, not this one, but they gave me a stick and they bought me equipment because I had no hockey equipment or anything like that. So when I went to the first ever Quebec games, the Jeux du Québec in '71, first year ever, I was I went there, and there were a lot of articles that appeared in the papers, the Montreal Gazette and the Montreal Star back then, and the Journal de la Presse, and they talked about me, and my parents were like, whoa, right? And when I came back, my mom was all like, they were very embarrassed, that my son, they talked about him in the papers and he doesn't have his own stick. So I bought this, cost $12, I remember, right? It was made by the Canadian lacrosse manufacturer. I think it was the Micmac Indians, I'm not sure, but I kept that stick, and it hangs downstairs, right? And then I brought with me these two things here. This is the Quebec sweater. In 1977, the Canada Games. I kept the sweater. I think it's a sweater anyway. And this is a silver medal that today I say that we won, right? Because to me, I lost the gold. I didn't win the silver. So this was really important because I think I kept these, and I kept them in regards to when we played that in '77. I think lacrosse in Quebec was at a peak. We had come from, in '73, we had finished in the juniors, right? Back then, the Founders Cup was played at the Canada Games every 4 years. So the juniors, we had come, I think, from 8th position. And in '77, we finished second. In '81, it was a juvenile team. They won gold. So Quebec was becoming, I think, a powerhouse in lacrosse. We had come a long way, and we were good. And we were measuring ourselves against what we knew were the best. Ontario, BC, right? And I think, I do a parallel, I think, a little bit with Nova Scotia, right? Nova Scotia lacrosse also at that time did well, right? And so lacrosse in Canada was getting better. It was becoming bigger. We could have done more. We could have been more. I think we would have had the team and players to maybe play in a Man Cup or a Minto Cup, right? Mm-hmm. It was not governed that way. But yeah, so I brought this, and I keep this as a good souvenir, as lacrosse was really strong, and it was just getting stronger back then. All right, well, this one here is, this is a Dale McKenzie sweater. I think Dale has the red one. So this is the Quebecois sweater in '74, '75 in Montreal. Now, the reason I brought this and I have this, is you have to understand that I started playing junior in '74. And I went to see some of these lacrosse games. My coach, Pierre Filon, would bring me to the games. And in '75, and I was like in awe, like watching that game and watching players, like John Davis and Sandy Lynch. And in '76, all of a sudden, I'm in a junior team, and my GM is John Davis. And my coach is Sandy Lynch. And I meet John Ferguson. And all of a sudden, I'm in their world, and I'm part of their world. And I get to, I say mentor a little bit, by John Davis, some of the things he said to me, right? Like John Davis taught me one thing, after one game, first game ever in my life that I hadn't scored. I had, I think, 5 or 6 assists, but I didn't score. And we won that game. And he came to me in the room and he asked me, how'd you like your game? And I said, well, I didn't score. And he said, we won. We won. And he goes, do you remember? He goes, can you tell me who won the scoring championship in '74 in the NLL? And obviously I had no clue, right? He goes, can you tell me who finished second? And I had no clue. And then he asked me, can you tell me who won? And yeah, I knew who won, right? The Caribou had won. And he told me, yeah, well, I finished second, right? But the Caribou won. And that lesson stuck with me. I brought this, which is the Joe Cambria Merit. This was an award that I got from the Quebec Federation or Quebec Lacrosse. this is actual my hand and my lacrosse stick, my last lacrosse stick that I played with. And it represented, it was just not a recognition of the player, I think, or the records, or being the best player. It was more than that. This award was given, and is given, or was given, to people that were outstanding people and individuals that helped the game by their, their selfishness, their work, and their effort, and they were recognized by an award that had my name. So it was probably the greatest thing I ever got, because it was just not in recognition of the player. It was also the person. And I also brought, this is sentimental. A lot of people have scrapbooks and pictures, and it's this scrapbook I only got many years later. So I told you I didn't come from an athletic family, and my parents were not involved with the game in any way. But my mom, she came and she saw one lacrosse game actually in Lachine. And after she went home, she did everything she could to try to dissuade me from playing again. She was just like, she couldn't believe what they were doing to her son. So anyway, I have a lot of stories about that, but later I found all these scrapbooks that came, all the paper, clippings that she had put together, right? So I know that she was very proud of what I accomplished, even though she didn't want me to play. She, So I've got, it's funny because I have had her and my brother Gabriel, thank God, right? And I'm really happy, and I'm for them, because as you grow older, your legend gets bigger, right? What I mean is that you start, it's like almost like a fish story, right? You talk about that trout that you fished in '76. All of a sudden, it's a monster. This keeps me honest, right? Everything that I say, I can go back and prove it. It's in the books, right? So when I won that scoring championship with the Can-Am League in 1980, and I finished first over great players, right? You talk about, I played with Del McKenzie, Dave White, you just Bruce Roundpoint, Louis DeLille, these all players that are legends, in some way, or part of the Ontario Lacrosse or even the Canadian Hall of Fame. Well, I played against them, and I beat them, and I can show you, right? I've got the clippings, and I've got that. So to me, it keeps me honest, right? And it's nice, and it's going to be nice for my grandkids one day, maybe to have some interest in that. Yeah.
I have a question for you, Joe.
Yeah.
On entend souvent au Québec des gens qui disent, dans l'histoire de la crosse au Québec, il y a eu des joueurs, il y a eu de bons joueurs, il y a eu des vedettes, et puis il y a eu Joe Cambria.
Ouais.
Qu'est-ce que ça te fait d'entendre ça?
Ça me fait plaisir, naturellement, parce que être comparé avec ces gens-là, souvent on m'a comparé à Jean Béliveau. J'ai des articles qu'on compare à Guy Lafleur, à Wayne Gretzky. Mais lorsqu'on parle de personnes comme Jean Béliveau ou Bobby Orr, ça me touche énormément, parce que ces gens-là, quand par exemple Jean Béliveau, c'était plus que juste un joueur de hockey. Hein? Il a été reconnu comme étant un gentleman, il était membre de plusieurs conseils d'administration, c'était au-dessus du sport. Puis quand on a ces comparaisons-là, mais c'est sûr que ça me touche énormément, puis ça me fait extrêmement plaisir. J'ai peut-être un peu réussi dans ce que je voulais, c'était d'être reconnu comme étant plus que juste un joueur.
I've heard people say in Quebec Lacrosse, there were players, there were stars, there were superstars, and then there was Joe Cambria. What does that do to you when you hear this?
I'm very, very pleased. To me, just have my name associated with the game is unbelievable, right? Be part of that history in a certain way. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that was done is forgotten or doesn't exist. So I'm happy today to be able to talk about that period. When I hear that, it's it's like when my number was retired. My number was retired in Quebec, but yet today Quebec teams that go out and play with my number. They play with 19. It doesn't exist anymore, right? But the importance is that what it does to me is when people say that, people compare me to, Jean Beliveau and Bobby Orr, right? When they say that, it's obviously it's a great compliment, and it's for me. It's obviously I'm happy, right? But I don't dare compare myself to those people. But I guess that I achieved what I wanted to achieve, which was being remembered as a good person and an ambassador for the game, outside of just the player.